Hi guys, my name is Connor Sokulski, and today I'll be cooking the Minestrone Soup for the High School Culinary Challenge 2020 competition. We'll get right into it here. We'll start off by taking our oil, throwing it into our saucepan, and bumping that up to a medium heat. And we'll let that go. So we have all of our carrots and mirepoix vegetables, mise en place. We'll have that ready to go. Once this oil gets hot enough, starts shimmering a little bit, we'll add these in and we'll cook them until they're about translucent. While we're waiting for that to go, we can start with chiffonading our basil. So what we'll do here is we'll take our leaves and we'll kind of lay them one on top of each other. And we'll roll them up nice and tight. And we'll take our nice sharp knife and we'll just go and cut it at about ½ centimeter intervals. And we'll get nice long strips of basil. And that's our basil cut, so we'll have that ready to go. And then, after this is all nice and finished, we'll stick that back in our mise en place. We'll take our parsley and we'll get this nice and chopped up as well. So we will get a fair bit. Rip off whatever you need. Put back whatever you don't. Okay. And then we will do a cross chop on the parsley and just get it nice and finely chopped. We don't want any big pieces in there. You go nice and fast. If you have a sharp knife, you avoid bruising. It makes it look really nice. You don't have to worry about it blackening and looking not the greatest in your lovely soup. So, really fine chopping here. Nice and small. Okie dokie. Yeah, so I am just about happy with that. And it's good timing too, because our oil is just about ready to go. So we will get that up into our mise en place. Okay, wipe the knife and wipe your board. It's very important to keep your workstation clean, and it's very important to clean as you go. This will help you become very organized. That's about as good as we're going to get it. Set that right here. Okay, so our oil is now nice and shimmery. It moves pretty liquidy. It's not as thick as it was. So we'll take our mirepoix and we'll throw it in there, making sure to get every little bit off. Now you can hear it kind of starting to sizzle a little bit. We'll let that go. And that'll go for as long as it needs to, just until the onion becomes slightly translucent and the rest of the vegetables become soft. We'll get our celery and our zucchini ready to go. These will be the next additions to the pot. And we also have our pasta water going. So we'll have that ready whenever it starts boiling. We'll throw our pasta in there, and then we'll add it from the pasta. We'll drain it, and then we'll throw it in there when it's time to. And I'm just going to wait for this to go. It's important to make sure that your vegetables, you keep them moving as you're going. Otherwise, they will start to burn a little bit. You don't have to keep a constant eye on them. You don't have to keep touching them as they're going, because that will slow them down a little bit. But every once in a while, just make sure that they are not burning, and make sure they're not sticking to the bottom either. This will take a little while, especially depending on the size of the vegetables. The smaller the vegetable the cooker, the faster it'll cook. But you do have to keep that consistency up, right? You don't want to have your carrots really, really small but your celery, you know, a medium dice, and your onion, a large dice, right? You have to keep that consistency. And that's what's most important, not really the size of the vegetables, but the consistency of the vegetables in there. You'll just have to wait a little bit longer depending on how big you make them. Of course, you don't want to make them too big, because then they become hard to eat. But, you guys know what you're doing. You guys will cut them up nice and adequate. So the carrots will take the longest to cook out of all of these. They are the hardest vegetable here. The onions and the celery are going to take about the same time to cook. That's why you just want to make sure that you're keeping them moving. You don't want them to brown too much. You don't want them to burn. You just kind of want to let those carrots go. You want to make sure that the carrots aren't burning and that they're just slowly starting to soften up. They're not going to be super soft when you start adding the rest of the ingredients, but you just want them to get to a point where you can kind of see through the onion, and then the carrots will cook as everything else is added and as things go along. So let's say another couple minutes here, and we'll be ready to add the rest. Okay. So here's about good for the vegetables. You can see the onion is a little bit translucent. It's not as solid white as it was when we threw it in there. The carrots aren't quite as soft as we want them, but that's okay because, as I said, we will be adding more stuff. This will be cooking for longer, so we don't have to worry about that. So next thing we're going to add is we're going to add our zucchini and we're going to add our cabbage. Same thing. It's cooking time, that's why we add these a little bit later. Zucchini is a very watery vegetable. It won't cook for very long before it becomes nice and soft, and the cabbage is very similar. It doesn't take a whole lot of time for the cabbage to cook down. So we will add these in, and we'll sweat them for about 5 or so minutes before they just start to soften up just a little bit. And then we're going to add our tomatoes and our chicken stock. That nice and mixed. Okay. Add a little bit to this. Okay. So as you can see, our zucchini and our celery have kind of broken down a little bit. They're a little bit less rigid. The cabbage is nice and malleable. It doesn't hold its shape as well. And the zucchini is starting to get just a little bit of color. That's exactly what we're looking for. So now we're going to add our chicken stock, our tomatoes, and our basil. A little trick I like to do is putting everything I need to add at once into the same cup. That way I don't forget anything. Everything's just kind of ready to go. So I've got the basil, the tomatoes, and some of the chicken stock in here. So we'll add all of that. Make sure you're using a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon to make sure you get all of that out. And we'll add the next liter of our chicken stock. Okay. So we'll make sure that there's no more vegetables on the sides here. Make sure we get everything incorporated. And we're going to bump the heat up to about a medium high, maybe high, just to kind of get that boiling going. So bump that. Okay. So the idea here is we're going to bring this up to a quick boil. We're going to reduce the heat down to a simmer, and we're just going to kind of let the vegetables cook off a little bit until they're nice and soft, especially those carrots. You really want to make sure that those carrots are soft and edible. Otherwise, it's not going to be a very fun soup to eat. And after that, we are going to add our beans and pasta. We're going to make sure our pasta water is nice and boiling. Make sure that it is important to have that pasta water nice and boiling. You want to make sure it's cooked when it's ready to go in. Otherwise, the pasta is going to be hard. It's not going to produce a very nice product in the end. You could also cook the pasta in the soup. I would recommend throwing that pasta in now or so because you really want to make sure that it's cooked through and all the flavors are kind of in there and it's ready to eat. So our pasta water is boiling now. We are going to make sure that it's salted. We'll take our salt, just like that. And we're going to throw our pasta in there. It's not a whole lot of pasta, and it shouldn't take too long to cook. So we'll let that go for a little bit. So it's important that you stir the pasta every once in a while. You don't want it to stick to the bottom or to each other. If they stick to each other, it'll hinder their cooking ability, and it's just not going to be very nice to look at if you've got pieces of pasta that are stuck together in your soup. And when you're cooking your pasta here, you're looking for an al dente or just a bit of a bite. I would definitely recommend tasting your pasta and then before draining it, so you just know just when it's perfect. You do want it a little bit undercooked because it will cook a little bit more when you put it in the hot soup when you serve it. Just be mindful of that. And don't be afraid to stir the pasta with the same utensil you're using to stir the soup. I've always found that it added a little bit more flavor to my pasta, and realistically they're both going in the same place anyway. I don't think it really matters too much. And it saves on dishes too. So our soup is slowly coming to a boil now. It's starting to get a little bit rolling boil here, so we're actually going to turn that down just a tad, and we'll see where that gets us. We're looking for a slight simmer here, nothing more. If you boil it, you have a chance of reducing the liquid too much, and you get a very thick soup with not enough liquid. Minestrone is a very finicky soup in that it's very important to have a good stuff to soup ratio. If you've got too much stuff, it becomes very difficult to eat. If you've got too much soup, it just doesn't feel like minestrone. So it's very important to keep that ratio as balanced as possible. So we brought it down. This is probably what you're looking for here in terms of a simmer. You're just going to let that go for a little while until those vegetables are cooked. Same thing with the pasta. You're going to taste it as you go. You're going to taste those carrots especially. Make sure that they are soft enough to eat. You don't want them to be too hard. That will be points against you in the tasting. I'm going to grab our tasting spoon here. I'm going to try and find one of our pastas. There we go. I can tell just by looking at it, it's a little bit under. You can tell it's just white on the edges, you can see. That's a little bit undercooked. We're going to let that go for a little while longer before we do anything about tasting or anything like that. And this is a good time to check our pasta or our soup as well. Now, it's a similar thing here. When you're picking it up, you can feel that the carrots are still quite firm. And that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for a little bit of a softer product. So like that, like the pasta, we'll let that go for a little while longer until we're ready to take it out. So with the soup here, a good test if you want to just make sure before you taste it, if you want to see if it's ready to go, you can bring up a piece of carrot along the side. You can kind of use your spoon as a knife and see how soft it is. You can kind of press it against the edge of the spoon. And as you can see, it's a little bit tough to go through, but it's a little bit tough, but it's not as tough as a regular carrot would be. So I'd say that's another couple more minutes tops before we can really turn that down. The pasta, just by guessing, yeah, you can see, like compared to before, it's puffed up quite a bit. You don't really have as much of that white outline on the edges. So what we'll do is we'll taste it really quick. Yeah, and that's perfect. So we will shut that off. And then we'll take our strainer, we'll take our pot, and we'll go strain that pasta. So once you have your pasta strained out, what you can do is you can throw it into a used container. Make sure it's not too dirty. And just store it in there for the time being instead of leaving it in the pot. And make sure you're getting everything. You don't want to be leaving out any bits of pasta. That's money right there, that's money. So let that sit. Our pasta part is done. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Just wash up the pot. Okay, and now we're just waiting on the soup here. So I would say this is about good for the soup. I'll give it a taste just to make sure. Like I said, make sure that you're getting those carrots. And of course, this is also a good place to taste for seasoning as well. That's perfect. But it needs more salt. So we'll give it a quick hit of salt. Make sure when you're salting your food, you always want to undersalt it first, because you can always add salt later. You cannot remove salt from the soup. So what we'll do here is we will throw our beans in. The goal with the beans here is just to get it to warm through. The beans here are already cooked, they're already ready to go, they're just cold. So we'll throw them in the soup, we'll get that in there, and we'll bring that back up to a boil to really get those beans warmed through and ready to go. As soon as those beans are warmed through, we're ready to add the last of our stuff. We're ready to add our noodles, our parsley, and we'll top with our cheese, and then we're good to go. Okay, so that's boiling nicely. Now we don't want to add our parsley in too early, because what will happen is, because it's cut so small, it'll basically cook and it will lose its nice green color. And that's kind of the whole point of this parsley, is to add that nice green color in contrast to all the reds and the oranges and the dulled greens that we have in here. So we want that nice, vibrant, fresh green. So here we will add our pasta and we'll get that in there. We will bump down the heat because those beans should be nice and warm. We will taste again. And we'll make sure that we're nicely seasoned here. It's close, still more salt. The soup will take quite a bit of salt. Those beans will suck up quite a bit of juice, and they are not salted. So they will require a bit of a pick-me-up there. A good method for tasting your soups, I use 2 spoons myself, but what I would recommend to save on dishes and save on cross-contamination is a 2-spoon method. So you take 1 spoon, you leave that spoon clean. Nobody's mouth touches that spoon, and you use it to spoon food into the one that does go into your mouth. Now when this spoon stays clean, you don't have to really worry about it too much. Sure, you have to wash it afterwards, but then you don't have to worry about eating other people's spoons, you know? So it's just a way to keep sanitary. Just a little bit more salt, and then we'll add our parsley, and then we're ready to serve. Okie doke. We'll give that a quick stir around. Throw in our parsley. We'll save a little bit to top at the end. About that much, so we'll add a nice little bit. Get that around. You'll get that nice, fresh vegetal flavor from the parsley. It'll really contrast with the root vegetables and the cooked cabbage and the zucchini. You'll get a really nice contrast of flavor there. So we'll throw that off. And we're ready to plate. So I've got my serving plates here. Ideally, you'd want these warm. So I would stick them in the oven a little bit beforehand, before you serve. Then you'll grab your ladle. And it's about an 8-ounce serving. So I've got a 6-ounce ladle here, so we'll kind of eyeball it. So like I said before, you want a really good stuff to broth ratio. So we'll take it, we'll make sure we're not spilling anywhere. We'll get it in there. Really making sure that we've got a nice ratio. I'm going to go a little bit heavier than 8 ounces here, just because my bowl is a little bit bigger. But we're still keeping that ratio in mind. And you can see that parsley in there. It gives it a really nice color, because there's a nice contrast, nice fresh green. At the end, before you plate up, it's very important to give your rims a little bit of a wipe. Any soup you might have spilled or any finger marks that are there, we'll get rid of those nice and easy. Okay. And then we'll top with a little bit of Parmesan. It'll melt right in. So you might want a little bit to give it a little bit of a mountain. That soup is warm. And then, top of a little sprinkling of parsley. And there you go. That's minestrone.